with our host, Gary Anderson.
We are back. We're talking about UFOs. We talked about the Battle of L.A. We talked about fake videos and all that stuff. Here's the point. Some of these people that post up on YouTube or on Facebook, Jeff, they get a group of people on them, seriously, that believe it or want to believe these videos so much. And if you make the remark, okay, that, hey, this thing might not be what people are talking about, let's face it, you got an aircraft coming, right? A jetliner. It has headlights on the wings. It's coming at you from miles away. You see it. And then it banks left or right and you don't see it anymore. People will say, oh my God, I saw a UFO and poof, it was gone. Or they see these helicopters around Las Vegas doing their thing. And
Gary,
yeah, go ahead.
I've had people think it was a UFO just watching the plane fly off in the distance because of perception. As it goes in the distance, it looks like it's going lower to the ground. See, look, it's going down there. And like, oh my God, yeah, okay.
So how do you handle those reports when you get them into Mufon?
Well, I try and treat everyone with the same amount of dignity, despite my personal feelings on, say, a hoax. I will never out and out, call someone a name for hoaxing or whatever. We just mark it as a hoax and file it away, and that's that. We have had people that have made repeat filings of hoaxes, and after a while, we just block their IP address from being able to file a report with us. But, fortunately, that's a small percentage that we have to deal with, and it's unfortunate that that does happen. But, again, I look at it as part of the field, and, sometimes it's not just people making reports like that that's the hoax. Sometimes it's like disinformation that's been seeded into the field years ago and passed around as urban legend, and so it's muddied the water so much that some people believe it to be a fact, when in fact it can be traced back to certain disinformation campaigns or statements made by unscrupulous individuals, shall we say. So, yeah, there's, you have to have a good BS meter. And I'm not perfect. I don't know anyone that is perfect. Everyone makes mistakes. But, yeah, I have a certain disdain for hoaxers. I tend to think very little of them as individuals, and they do nothing to help the cause. But, again, when that happens with MUFON, any report that comes in, we treat with an open mind and give the same amount of dedication to the investigation of it, no matter how absurd it may sound, because, how can you say something is absurd in this field? We're dealing with an alien subject, and some of the best, most verified, documented stories have elements of absurdity that you just have to stand aside and go, really? Like, for instance, I could name the one gentleman, I think it was the Santini case, where the alien supposedly landed near him and asked him for some water from his canteen, and one of them was making pancakes inside the ship, which they shared with them. And there's even, photos of the pancakes on record that were tested. Surprisingly, had no salt content whatsoever, which was amazing compared to, how us trying to make similar pancakes. So, you stop and you think about this element of the case. Well, that's totally absurd. The aliens were making pancakes. Yeah, that's absurd, and that's one of the things I love about this case. How do you make that up?
You know what? This
tends to be one of the better documented cases, I'm afraid.
I can say this. I get each day a whole bunch of reports on UFOs every day because, my radio show, people are sending me videos, they're sending me stories and stuff like that. Or images of UFOs. And I'll be honest with you, 90% of the images I get on UFOs, somebody is really good in Photoshop at manipulation. The other one that they take it with a still digital camera that their sensor is dirty because that UFO, no matter where they aim at it, it's there. And it's a dust spot on their sensor. But when I was out there taking pictures of whatever, and this UFO keeps appearing. Well, yeah, it's going to keep appearing if you have an aperture at a real small opening and you're shooting up at the sky and you got dust spots in the center, you're going to have UFOs.
Well, and another favorite technique that's used quite frequently is to be shooting indoors through either a window or in a car through the windshield. And, the lights that appear moving are actually the reflections of light of some object from inside the house or inside the vehicle reflected off the windshield or the window. And of course it looks mysterious to the untrained eye, but to the observer and the person that knows how to analyze it correctly, you can quickly see, the origination of the light source, which is, generally the key to what you're analyzing. Classic one I had, gal sent me a photo of, Earl and I laugh about this one, photo of what she said was what she was seeing coming up from the pond in her backyard. And you can clearly see it's the reflection. Not only can you see the iPhone in the glass reflected taking the picture, but it looks like the backwards face of either a watch or clock. And you could see the numbers and the hash marks in between the numbers. Come on, please, really. So, yeah, a lot of times, I chuckle about things like that, but, it's frustrating to have to weed through that stuff. But then you get the good stuff once in a while.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if you've seen the picture of the case I tout as the slow UFO, the SLO UFO. But that is just a darn good-looking photo of a disc taken July 7th, 1967. Here in San Luis Obispo, California. It's a magnificent photo of a disc, and yet no one claims credit for taking that photo. How amazing is that?
Well, you have
one of the best shots, but nobody says they took that photo.
You know why? I can be honest with you. Back when I started in 76, the UFO thing really didn't start taking a hold to about 80s. People would call in, talk about UFOs. It was about 80s when that was going on. A lot of people were scared to talk about UFOs or anything like that because they were scared people look at them. Well, maybe what hospital did he escape from? So a lot of people, a lot of people wouldn't admit when they saw something. I had an encounter, which I talked to Davenport, from the UFO Reporting Center. He was on my show several times, and he had an encounter similar to mine. I was back in the mid-'70s, going back from North Carolina, or coming from North Carolina, back home to Seattle. I was in the desert in New Mexico with my first wife, and I'm going to leave it. If that was a UFO, they would have abducted her and not returned her. But anyway, I was in the desert. Okay, I was in a GTO. I wanted to go fast. I wanted to get home. I just wanted to get out of my situation I was in. So I was doing like 90, 95 miles an hour through the desert. And all of a sudden, all around the car lit up. Inside the car, it was brighter than daylight, where it was really hurting my eyes. So first thing in my mind, you know what I think it is, Jeff? I figure it's a police helicopter. So I do the honorable thing. I pull off the side of the road. I get out of the car. And now I'm trying to look at the light. It was so bright all around the car, and I couldn't see the object because it was just emitting so much bright light. And poof, it was gone. That fast. But you know what? I've been on many helicopters in my life. Many. More than I would ever want to even remember. Every one of them you recognize. I don't care what type of helicopters it was. Especially in the 70s. I know what they sounded like. There was not a single sound in that desert. It was void of any sound. So I know.
Well, it sounds too as bright as that light was from your description. If it had been close enough to create that bright of a light, you would think you would have felt some rotor wash too.
And the vibration and all that. Believe me, I remember Huey sounded like, okay, and any helicopter, you would have had the vibration. And it was nothing. So whatever I encountered, but you know what? I didn't talk about it for years and years. I didn't even talk about it till about a year ago because you know why? I didn't want people to label me as...
That was the climate then.
Yeah.
That was the climate then. You didn't talk about that kind of stuff. Not in the 70s and, very little in the 80s. And then around the 90s, it started loosening up and becoming okay to maybe guardedly talk about it. And then all of a sudden, after Art Whitley Strieber started the radio shows, then the floodgates opened and it became a national topic all of a sudden. But until then, it was kind of the snickering tabloid cover type gossip you'd hear about it. So that's why, of course, I never talked about any of my sightings that I had or things I knew until much later in life.
What was
because I didn't want to be, put in the rubber room.
That's it, a rubber room with a rubber floor and the rubber walls. But what was your biggest, the most profound sighting you ever had, Jeff?
Oh, let's see. Well, if I haven't told you about this one, it's probably the best sighting I've ever had. Well, no, it undoubtedly is the best sighting I've had. Not that I've had that many, because I haven't. I think I've only had 2, maybe 3 at most. But this was summer of 1979. I lived in a recording studio in Azusa, California at the time, which was at the corner of Azusa and Arrow Highway. So San Gabriel Mountains were kind of a little to the north of us, and it was a fairly metropolitan area, fairly large city at the time. And it was warm evening. I remember we were having kind of a later dinner because it was that warm. So my girlfriend and I had walked across the street to the basket market there and got a couple steaks that we were going to come back and barbecue there at the recording studio. And it was coming out of the market when movement, I caught the corner of my eye, peripheral vision kind of up above, and as I turned to look, here was, the closest thing I can give you as a reference, kind of looked like the underside of what you'd think the old Battlestar Galactica from the original series might look like. It was just this huge rectangular thing barely moving that I knew shouldn't be there. I mean, it was gargantuan in size, and by that I would say probably a mile in length, and I would estimate maybe at least a half mile in width. As far as how thick it was, I'm not really sure because, it was so big that I didn't get to see that aspect of it. But it was barely moving, maybe 25, 30 knots, I would say. And other people in the parking lot there, we weren't the only ones that saw this. Everyone was kind of whooping and whistling. It was almost like a concert atmosphere.
Oh, wow.
If you've ever been to like an outdoor concert at an amphitheater or whatever, say Hollywood Bowl, how people whistle, when the band's playing. That's what it was kind of like in the parking lot. And I remember turning to my girlfriend and saying, this is it. Now people are going to have to say and admit that this is a real phenomenon. There's no denying it now. It's going to be all over the news. It'll be on the radio. This is big, because here we are in L.A. County, a big city. This is right there going across the San Gabriel Valley. Yeah, everyone's got to see it. I knew everyone in that parking lot there was acknowledging it, right? Well, okay, so it moves along. And you know how old cathode ray TVs, when you shut them off, they drop down to that horizontal line?
Oh, yes.
That would go across the screen. This ship, it reminded me of like Pablo Picasso's light paintings he used to do with a pen. You move the light so fast that you'd see a solid line. All of a sudden, because the ship didn't have any discernible lights, really. The way we saw it was through the ambient lighting. It still wasn't dark out. It was fairly light still. But then all of a sudden, this thing I can't say that I